They are viewer from Latin America around the world. My name is Luis David Fernandez Zambrano. And this free diet, as part of the Child of Culture of Peace and Human Rights, the Faculty of the Social Science at University of Buenos Aires, we will kick a conference to club webbing and just future the intersection and restorative justice and children's rights to transform life, featuring the distinguished presence of the renowned Israeli jurist Tali Gal, our keynote speaker. This conference embodies world unwavering mission on democracy, the diversity, educational, and cultural knowledge on our contemporary landscape, placing it at the service of all humanity. Thus, share adorned to welcome to gather interdisciplinary voices and perspectives in this space, allowing us to reflect, sing, and optimize the construction of a much better tomorrow. This event will be broadcast across the various social media platforms and the relevant page with the friends purpose and amplifying the reach and mission of our share. It is important and not that this virtual academic event, like the previous ones, will be recorded and will serve as mandatory and optional consultation material available on our YouTube channel. This content will provide a source of lucid reflections on building a better future, accessible in the coming days, the months, years, the decades, week now, centuries, for undergrad and graduate professor and studying from various universities around the world. First, I would like to present the brief biography of one of their friends and esteemed colleague, Tali Gal, as a delicate description of her numerous academic achievements will take excessively long. Moreover, she hardly needs an introduction, and she one of the most influential jurists and recent decades. Professor Gali holds an joint position at the Institute of Criminology and the Faculty of Law at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he is the Professor of Children and Adolescent Rights and Academics Director of the Children and Adolescent Rights Program in the Minerva Center of Human Rights. He training integrate legal, criminological, and physiological knowledge involving restorative justice, the children's rights, and therapeutic jurisprudence. She is an author of the book The Child Victims and Restorative Justice, a needs rights model, and co-editor of international perspective and empirical findings. Before joining the Hebrew University in 2022 year, she has professor at the University of Haifa, where she served and director of the Faculty of the Criminology since en el año 2018. Professor Gali has extensively published in peer review and legal review journal in the his areas of specialization. Tali is associate editor of the International Society of Victimology before entering academia. Talis was the legal advisor to the National Council and the Children in Israel. She is currently a member of the Children Law and Policy Network and King Mary University of London, England. which brings together a scholar and professional research in social, political, and legal issues uh, related to children and childhood through the exchange of interdisciplinary knowledge and records. It provides an online hookup for research, teaching, and political formulations. Um, it's very relevant that the protocol for the event will be as follows. First, Professor Tali Gal will have the floor for 13 14 minutes. The following will be question and answer session and concluding remarks. Without further ado, my name is Luis David Fernandez Zambrano, and Herbery comments this wonderful day and interdisciplinary intellectuality reflection in service of humanity. Professor Tali Gal, you have the floor, please.
Thank you so much, Luis. I'm delighted to be here. Two requests. One is for you to enable me to share my presentation. I still cannot do it. And the other one is that my name is Tali Gal, so for further reference. But thank you for the warm introduction. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. And I was really happy to accept this invitation because speaking about the connection between children's rights and restorative justice enabled me to put together several of my writings really to show the broader framework connecting between law and sociology, criminology, and human rights with needs of children. So, I will begin without my presentation. I apologize for the viewers who are waiting for me to give a presentation. I just couldn't bring the host to make me, to enable me to share my presentation. So I'll just start without my presentation. So I would like to speak about children's rights. And Luis, if you understand me during my talk and enable me to share my presentation, my PowerPoint presentation, I will really appreciate it because then my talk will be complete. For now, let me say that the world, actually, the international community started to recognize children's rights and children's human rights in the 1920s. The first international document was the Geneva Declaration of 1924, which regarded children as objects of protection. So according to the Geneva presentation, the child must be fed, the child must be protected, the child must be nurtured, etc. Then the following document was the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child from 1959. This was post Second World War, where again children were conceived as objects of protection. So this is a bit longer document, which again says that children need to be protected. They have to be first to receive assistance during wars and armed conflicts. They need to be able to develop and nourished, to have connection with their parents or a family, etc. So these are very, very important documents. But then the turning point was really the 1989 United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which really made the big difference because for the first time, children were understood not only as objects of protection, but also as human beings, separate people from their parents. So children are conceived in the convention as dependent of their parents, but yet separate from them. So they can have separate wishes, views, desires, etc. Children are conceived as active, so they are not passive, they are active, they do things, they play, they write, they learn, they develop. They are also conceived as central, meaning that society needs to make adjustments to meet their needs and their development. And as I said before, they're separate from their parents, although still dependent on them to different levels. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is a very comprehensive document signed by all countries in the world, almost all countries in the world, and it has 4 guiding principles that are the key principles of human rights today, which are non-discrimination, meaning that children must not be discriminated against for any reason, their parents' status, their religious, their origin, etc., etc., their gender, of course. So this is not a discrimination. The second guiding principle is the best interest of the child, meaning that when children are, when there is a decision about a child, the best interest of the child must be very central to the decision. So those who make decisions have to take into account the best interests of the child as a central consideration. The third guiding principle is the right of children to life, survival, and development, called for short the principle of development, meaning that children have the right not only to survive and live, but also to thrive and fulfill their potential and learn and grow, etc. Then the fourth guiding principle is the principle of participation, which is the most important and most innovative one, which means that children have the right to participate in decision making. They have the right to state their views freely. And also, additionally, which is the most important, that adults are actually obliged to give due weight to their opinions in accordance with the child's maturity and age and capabilities, etc. So adults are actually required to listen to children and to take into account their views. So this is the principle of participation. Apart from these 4 principles, there are numerous rights, specific rights in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and under protection. So if I had a presentation, you would have seen them organized in a certain order, but under the right to protection, children have the right to be protected from abuse in their homes, for example. They have the right to a family, and if not a family, if the family is not a safe environment, then an alternative placement. They have the right to have connection with their parents if they're not able to live with them. And there is also a specific article protecting children in armed conflict, which is highly relevant today in our area and in others, unfortunately. Under the principle of provision, so other articles are actually about the state's obligation to provide children with services. So states are required to provide children with free education, health services, mental health services, social services, and also free time and free activities. So children are entitled not only to study and to be healthy, but they are also entitled to play and to go outside and to have playgrounds that are friendly to them. Then under the next rubric, I would say, are all the rights that have to do with children's agency or participation in decision making. So children, as I said before, have the right to be involved in decision making processes, but they also have the right to freedom of association. So they have the right to demonstrate and to protest against their government or against their schools or against whoever or their employers, for example. They have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They have the right to their own identity. So they have a right to their name, to their religion, to their culture and faith. So children are seen as separate and active and as whole human beings, I would say. So these are the main assets, I would say, or strands of children's rights. And the Convention on the Rights of the Child really maps the general rights of children with particular interest on the right to participation or the participation principle. And now I turn to restorative justice. And why I came into the subject of restorative justice, being a children's rights lawyer in my past and children's rights researcher in my present and also in my past. So what I found was that restorative justice is really a way to host the full range of children's rights in a way that is so much better than the formal legal structure. And let me delve into the principles of restorative justice. So what is restorative justice? Not everybody knows about this approach. Restorative justice is an alternative approach to punitive justice. So instead of focusing on punishing those who harm us or harm others, restorative justice focuses on reparation of harm. So instead of causing more harm, restorative justice actually strives to repair, to make better, to make people whole again, I would say, or even if this is impossible, at least to make them better and overcome what they went through in their victimization. According to the most recent definition, a restorative justice process is any process in which the victim, the offender, and or any other individual or the community members affected by the crime actively participate together in the resolution of matters arising from the crime, often with the help of a fair and impartial third party. So restorative justice processes are meetings, physical meetings between victims and offenders, their supporters, their community, and any other person who has been affected by the wrongdoing. And in these meetings, they try to talk about what happened, why it happened, what needs to be repaired, and how this should be repaired. Restorative justice has three main approaches. One of them is victim-offender mediation, which is really the most limited or intimate form of restorative justice, in which victims meet offenders alone with a mediator, and they speak about what happened. They decide on a reparation plan, and then if this is successful, they sign on the reparation plan, go home, and if the follow-up phase is successful, meaning that the perpetrator concluded or implemented the full reparation plan, then the meeting is successful. And if there is a criminal process, then it is there is a possibility to consider what happened in the restorative justice, and this can affect the criminal process. A broader framework is the conferencing, or the family group conferences, where not only the victim and the offender or the perpetrator are in the room together with the mediator, but also community members, family members, supporters of both of them. When the process takes place with children, then oftentimes it's called family group conference. And in these types of conferences, the family takes a central role. So really the protection of the family, the support of the family is central in these processes. And you can see how it resonates with children's rights, the holistic view of children as separate but yet dependent on their families. And then the broader form of restorative justice is restorative circles, or they're also called peace circles or justice circles. These are the broadest form, where all community members can attend. Very often these circles take place in traditional communities, Aboriginal communities, where there is also an interest to give respect or to pay respect to the tradition of the community. So there are all kinds of religious or spiritual symbols in this process, and the elders take a very central role. But still, the key goal of the process is for the victim and their supporters to tell the story of what happened, the perpetrator to take responsibility, to listen to the outcomes of their deeds, and for the whole community to take part in this discussion in order to reach a reparation plan. And reparation plans can take any forms depending on the wishes of the parties. It could be compensation or restitution. It could be an apology or an apology letter. It could be a rehabilitation plan for the perpetrator, because very often victims will want the perpetrator to get better, to stop committing crimes. They feel safer and they feel like their own harm had some kind of a meaning. So the outcomes can be very different. They differ from one process to the other, and they really depend on the wishes of the parties. And then, of course, this is the framework of restorative justice. But what about children? Why am I so interested in restorative justice with children? And before I started working on this issue, there wasn't much literature about theoretical and empirical literature about the implementation of restorative justice with children. There was some about youth offenders or juvenile offenders, but very little or almost nothing about child victims in restorative justice. And I found restorative justice appealing to a children's rights lawyer like myself because of the key notions of restorative justice, which are respect to all individuals in the room, reparation, so the emphasis on repairing the harm rather than punishing and hurting those who hurt the victim. The focus on emotional discharge. So this is an avenue where the law takes a more emotionally intelligent turn. So this is really an emotional intelligent process, where emotions have a place in the table, actually a key place in the table, which is crucial and very important for children's development. And last but not least, this is the notion of participation that restorative justice puts so much at the center, just like the children's rights notion. So you can see how the principles of restorative justice align so naturally and so holistically with the notions of children's rights. Let me delve for a few minutes more deeply into the benefits of restorative justice for child victims, for child perpetrators, and for communities around the children and adolescents. So if we think for a minute about the victims, for someone, a child or an adolescent who felt victim to a crime, for this person to be able to control the process, so to decide where the process will take place, if the meeting will be at a church or at a community center or in a home of someone or at an office or even in the police quarters, when the meeting will take place, who will be in the meeting, all these things, and also, of course, controlling the outcomes of the process. So controlling what the reparation plan will look like. This level of control and participation are an antidote to the lack of control that victims feel when they are victimized. So it's really a strong justice need for victims. What victims also receive or benefit in these processes is the acknowledgement of their harm or the harm that they suffered, and they have the opportunity to voice their story, to tell their story. They have an audience to listen to them. The environment in which they tell their story is safe and supportive, which is very different from the trial environment. So they have a supportive environment with their communities that listens to them and supports them while they tell their story. And the third benefit that they have, these young victims, child or adolescent victims, is that they can control the level of exposure. Unlike the criminal justice process, where they are told exactly what they have to say, what they're unable to say, they're questioned by defense attorneys very often about very private issues. In restorative justice, they have a very a strong level of control over how much they will tell, what they will expose, whether or not they want to attend at all the conference, etc. So victims and child and adolescent victims benefit a lot from these processes. For perpetrators, for youth or young perpetrators, this is a great opportunity for them to understand the consequences of their deeds. And I have to say here that for young perpetrators, going into court is not a developmental opportunity. When they go to court, they are busy in defending themselves. Their parents are busy defending themselves, blocking any accusations, because if these accusations are accepted, then the outcomes are disastrous. They are called criminals, they are punished, their freedom is taken from them. This is a very labeling and humiliating outcome. Whereas in restorative justice, the outcome is not humiliating. Actually, it's a respectful outcome. So when they're not busy protecting themselves and denying any responsibility, they are really open to understand what happened, to understand the damage of what they've done. When they hear their own parents crying sometimes and saying that they are ashamed, their own parents, and they ask for forgiveness for the victim, from the victim and the victim's family, then they understand the consequences of their harm. A term that is often mentioned in this regard or in this context is reintegrative shaming. What is reintegrative shaming? Is the opposite of stigmatizing shaming or shaming in general. Shaming is the process where people become ashamed of who they are, because they are stigmatized, because they're called criminals, felons, juveniles, etc. But what happens in restorative justice is that there is a division between the person who committed the crime and the crime itself. When the parents are there, when the brother of the perpetrator is there, or the grandmother of the perpetrator is in the room, and they deliver a complex message of, on the one hand, we love you, we care about you, we respect you, we want you to succeed. But at the same time, they also say, what you've done is terrible. We are hurt by what you've done, and look at the victim, look how they're hurt by what you've done. So there is a complete separation between the person and the wrongdoing. And this is where reintegrative shaming takes place. And this is where perpetrators can really look at what they've done as separate from their own identity and say by themselves, this is not who I am. I really regret what I've done. It's the wrong thing to do. I'm sorry, I take responsibility, etc. What perpetrators also gain from these processes is that actually these processes give an opportunity for their family members to express their concerns about this young perpetrator. So, for example, the family can say, we are worried you are not going to school. We are worried that you pick the wrong friends. We are worried that you drink too much. And then, because this is a protected environment where there is no stigmatization, no punishment in the end, they can really talk about these things and find solutions together. So this is for the benefit of the perpetrator as well. Best interest, rehabilitation, all these words which are connected to children's rights, of course. And then when we move to the community, what we see is that the community gets the opportunity to set boundaries, what is right and what is wrong. Domestic violence is forbidden, for example. Cyberbullying girls is forbidden, etc. So it's an opportunity to say, this is a red line that you've crossed. And this, of course, is relevant to other community members, not just the perpetrator and the victim. This also, we have to remember that restorative justice processes involve bystanders. So people who were around the event, they saw the event, they were quiet when this event happened. Now they're in the process, they're active, they support the victim, they support the perpetrator in taking, expressing accountability and regret for what they've done. So they're also there taking an active and responsible role in the process. And the last benefit that I want to talk about is the opportunity to normalize future encounters. So if the victim and the perpetrator come from the same community, and usually if we talk about children and youth, adolescents, if it's a violent crime, then more likely that it happened between people who know each other, young people who know each other, than not. So they will meet each other again in school, in the park, in the neighborhood, somewhere else. And now after the process, they can really, cross the door or cross the street together without exploding, without getting all stressed about it. So these are also things, this is a benefit for the community as a whole. I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned about the notion of child-inclusive restorative justice. So what is inclusiveness in terms of restorative justice? And this really aligns with the centrality of children as referred to in the children's rights literature. So we're talking about adjusting the restorative justice processes to the needs, the wishes, and the capabilities of every child, the child perpetrator and the child victim. And these are titles that really, eliminate the other aspects of these children and adolescents. But the goal is to really adjust and attune the process according to their own capabilities and needs and wishes. So, for example, the information needs to be full, detailed, age appropriate, and very clear information before the process begins so that they know exactly what they're going to enter and they can decide whether they want to participate in it. They also need to be able to identify the most suitable form of participation. So it could be a letter, it could be a drawing, it could be them sitting the whole time but being quiet, it could be them taking part as active participants as everybody else, the adults in the room, etc. So they select the level of participation and form of participation. And they also are able to identify the best support people. So the preparation is key in restorative justice processes, and it's very important to identify if the grandmother or the sister or the best friend or all of them need to be in the room as support person. And throughout the process, from start to end, the participation has to be assisted. So children in different ages need to be encouraged and supported and really strengthened to be able to participate in these processes. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit in the time that I have left about lessons from practice. And by practice, I mean different restorative justice programs that I've been involved in studying them. And I have 4 studies from which I want to refer to the different or the 4 principles of children's rights. So let's start with the participation principle, the principle of children having the right and need to participate in decision-making in all matters involving their lives. One of the studies that I was involved in is about forgiveness in restorative justice processes following sexual violence. This is a project that was conducted by Tali Gal. She's a doctorate student of mine, and she interviewed victims of sexual assault who participated in restorative justice processes. So one of her interviewees said, for example, I wanted to confront him about everything that had happened to me over the years, to get some answers to the questions running through my mind like a mantra. And this is really a good example of how participation can be so healing for victims and for young victims as well. What I have learned from years of studying and interviewing and learning from children and youth and also working with victimized children, I learned that even when they're hurt, even then when they're afraid, even they have traumatic symptoms, they want to participate. They want to be active. They sometimes need to rest for a minute. They need to breathe. They need to take a break, but then they want to return to the room and express themselves and tell their story and tell it to the people who really matter. And very often the people who really matter are the perpetrator. So this is just one example of the importance of participation for young victims. The second principle in children's rights is equality, as I said before, non-discrimination. And here, this connects with procedural justice and just fairness in restorative justice. And I've learned a lot from another study that I conducted with Tali Gal, who I mentioned earlier, and Ronen Shirman, who is also a PhD student. This is a study about restorative justice processes that took place after cyber crime, sexual cyber crimes between youth, so youth against youth. And here I interviewed restorative justice facilitators in Israel, and also I got the wonderful help by Mary Dehan and Heidi Defever of interviewing moderator or mediators in Belgium. So here, for example, one of the interviewees said, I think that if you put people together, they start to understand each other. So just putting them together, but laying down the rules of how to speak, letting everybody participate, and being clear about the rules of the meeting is key, and it really enables everybody to speak, everybody to express themselves, and this is the experience of equality and procedural justice. So, for example, someone else, another facilitator said, the circle, which is the conference, is so powerful. Everybody is in it quietly. You can hear every sound, every pencil dropped on the desk. Every gesture is amplified. The emotions are very strong, but the discourse is polite. So really the politeness that is so strange and foreigner to our daily cultures, at least my culture, which is impolite and emotional and strong. In restorative justice meetings, everything is very polite and reserved, although the emotions are strong. So these are very powerful encounters, but at the same time, procedural justice is kept. The third principle that I wanted to talk about is the best interest principle, or well-being. And here I learned from another study, and another research student of mine, Ozzy Navon, who conducted a study on expressions of different cultures in restorative justice processes involving young offenders or young defendants. And he examined mainly restorative justice processes that involve children from the Arab community in Israel, and also restorative justice processes that involve children from Ethiopian origin in Israel. And what he found out that the involvement of supporters from the community is really helpful to promote the best interests of children. In the Arab community, or at least in some Arab communities, the grandmothers emerge as very powerful images and role players, because they are old and wise, and they can sit with men in the circle, and they become very central in restorative justice meetings and very good for the interest of the young offender. At the same time, what he found was the community paradox, especially in the Ethiopian community, where the community is at the same time a source of support, but also a source of shame. So very often families were ashamed and didn't want to reveal what happened to others in the community. So this is a challenge that needs to be addressed in order to support the best interests of children. And lastly, I want to talk about the fourth principle, which is development, the right of children to develop to their maximum potential. And here, restorative justice, we can see it as an opportunity. So the process itself is an opportunity. So in the last study that I want to mention, about the role of community leaders in restorative justice, which I conducted on a restorative justice program in Israel. Here, for example, one of the victims said, I told you that people hurt me because I was Arab. I was wrong. There are good people and bad people among Arabs and Jews. So I brought this sensitive example, especially in these days, to show that restorative justice, at least from what I learned and the experiences that I examined, that restorative justice can really heal and create bridges between communities. And it's really an opportunity for people to develop socially and emotionally, to realize that the other side is not the devil, to realize the humanity of the other side. And this is, I see, as a developmental opportunity, and we need it now more than ever. So to finalize, if I want to get back to the title of my presentation, Weaving a Just Future, Restorative Justice, Children's Rights, and Human Rights, I want to mention four points that are shared between restorative justice and children's rights. First of all, children should be seen as whole human beings So a child should not be seen only as a problem or only as a victim or only as someone who needs protection. Children are whole, they have wishes and connections and friends and difficulties, and we need to see them, regard them as whole. And restorative justice really gives the opportunity to do that. The second point is that restorative justice is very good in creating tailor-made processes. And this is, again, a presentation of children's human rights, because to really fulfill children's rights, we need to make processes, decision-making processes tailored to their capacities and needs. The third point is the importance of seeing children as partners. So children can be younger, inexperienced, their expression is maybe not developed as adults, but yet they are our partners in decision-making processes, and we need to see our joint interest in finding the best decisions for them. So partnerships is also key. And the last point for today is the notion of justice as reparation. So justice doesn't have to be punitive. Justice is not necessarily to punish others, to hurt others. Actually, justice can really heal, can really find reparation. And here I'm talking not only of individuals, but also of communities. So I think I'll finish here, and thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to hear them. Thank you.
Hello, good day.